In this edition of the Red and Blue Political Roundup, Democrats are poised to subpoena the special counsel's full unredacted report. The House Judiciary Committee authorized the action Wednesday. The vote was down party lines. Chairman Jerry Nadler now has the ability to force the Justice Department to hand over the confidential findings, plus all underlying evidence Robert Mueller used to reach his conclusions. However, Nadler says he will not take action immediately.
We're going to work with the Attorney General and for a short period of time, in the hope that he will reveal to us the entire Mueller report and all the underlying materials, and we'll go to court to get permission to have the 6E material. But if that doesn't work out, in a very short order, we will issue the subpoenas.
Last month, Mueller submitted his report to Attorney General William Barr. The AG said the investigation found President Trump did not collude with Russia during the 2016 campaign. Let's bring in CBSN political contributor Molly Hooper. Hi, Molly. So last month, the president said the public should see the full Mueller report. Do we know how the administration is preparing now that the investigation is over and that it may actually be released?
Well, that's a great question. Keep in mind, before the Mueller report was released, the White House counsel's office beefed up its attorney presence, essentially to 17 attorneys who are going to deal with House Democratic demands for documents, for witness testimonies related to all these investigations that are going on. So the White House definitely is going to be prepared to push back on, revealing certain information in that report that has to do with grand jury testimony, which is protected, as well as the classified information in the counterintelligence portion of the Mueller report, because keep in mind, this was essentially a counterintelligence, part of it has a counterintelligence component, given that Russia was trying to infiltrate and impact U.S. elections. Whether the president was involved in it or not is relevant, but the underlying investigation had to do with Trump's ability to meddle with U.S. elections.
Right.
And so that information will go probably to the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee. But it would be classified. It would be classified.
But so Molly, Nadler says he is not issuing this subpoena immediately. So do we know what happens next?
So what happens next is Bill Barr will continue to work with Jerry Nadler in terms of how much he will redact from the full Mueller report. Remember, Bill Barr, as been reported, wants to essentially provide this, the redacted version to Congress mid-April, maybe late April. And he said, hey, I'll come up and testify before House Judiciary and Senate Judiciary and take your questions on this. However, Jerry Nadler wants to have the ability to subpoena the full Mueller report. I almost feel like saying the full Monty, but the full Mueller report, as soon as Bill Barr provides the redacted version, because at some point what's going to happen is once the subpoena is issued, essentially the Attorney General will refuse it, and then you launch contempt of Congress charges, which goes to the court. And that will take a long time to go through the courts.
Right. One more thing going through the courts.
That's
All
right.
right. Molly, meanwhile, President Trump is standing firm on his threat to close the southern border. On Wednesday, he tweeted, "The issue is a national emergency." However, we're learning aides say other options are being explored. What do we know about those talks? I mean, we know that both Democrats and Republicans are very nervous about the border being closed, correct?
Well, more than nervous. I mean, you had key Republican senators like Rob Portman from Ohio speak out against closing the southern borders because there's so much trade that takes place, going cross-border from Mexico to the U.S., U.S. to Mexico, and all that entails. And so by closing the border, there has to be an ability to allow the trade to continue. That's the key concern that a lot of these members have. These are members who are concerned with the president's initial, trade decisions and pressing the other countries, to open more free trade, as they said. So this is an issue with Republicans, and if the president doesn't come up with a plan that allows for cross-border commerce, then he could have some problems in the Senate as well as the House, because the Democrats in the House are more than willing to move a measure that would essentially, curb the ability of the president to cause this trade issue. But where he has some help would be in the Senate with Republicans, and if he has Republicans who also want to, put their say on whether or not this happens or not, well, that's a different matter, and it's a different calculation.
It's true. I mean, I think that anyone who lives in a border region sort of understands the symbiotic relationship between a lot of those border towns. I mean, they're called sister cities for a reason. There is so much trade, like you said, on a daily basis. Those economies, would not be able to survive a very long shutdown for sure.
Well, and there are some Republicans on the border, like Will Hurd, who represents a vulnerable district in Texas with a long border on the Mexican-U.S. border, and he would be one I would keep an eye on to see where he goes on this issue.
Absolutely. All right, Molly, President Trump continued to backtrack on the Affordable Care Act Wednesday, saying he, quote, never planned to force a vote to repeal the bill prior to 2020. Now, that comment comes after the president last week said legislation was already underway to do so. So what does all this indicate about how health care will factor into the presidential election? I mean, it's just ramping up to be an even bigger deal, isn't it?
Well, it is, because keep in mind when he made that statement, again, it was uniting for Democrats who already were split amongst themselves over how they would proceed with their own health care plans for the 2020 election. Medicare for all versus Obamacare and it was causing them a lot of problems. But now they were ready to unite against whatever the Republicans were putting forward. So what it does indicate to me is that the president is listening, and this is actually, a big deal for Republicans on Capitol Hill. He's actually listening to people like Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, who would like to stay the Senate Majority Leader, and even more so would like to remain a member of the Senate because he's up for re-election in 2020. And he's listening to Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, who also indicated this is not the fight we want. We couldn't even win it when we had control of both chambers. Back in 2017, there was so much infighting, and we don't have an answer for replacing all of Obamacare, because there are key provisions like, coverage for pre-existing conditions and, staying on your parent's plan that essentially would be obliterated if this lawsuit is if these states are successful in their lawsuit that the Trump administration intervened on and basically said, hey, we're going to support obliterating Obamacare. But at this point, it just doesn't seem that there are enough Republicans in the Senate, or of course in the House, to come up with a plan that would actually make it through both chambers.
Right, and those provisions that you mentioned are quite popular. It would be really, really hard to take those away at this point. Molly, sticking with 2020 now, former Vice President Joe Biden has yet to officially launch his bid, but he's already facing allegations of inappropriate behavior from at least 4 different women now. Biden responded to the claims Wednesday. Let's take a listen to some of what he said.
Social norms have begun to change, they've shifted, and the boundaries of protecting personal space have been reset. And I get it. I hear what they're saying. I understand it. And I'll be much more mindful. That's my responsibility, and I'll meet it. But I'll always believe governing, quite frankly, life for that matter, is about connecting with people. That won't change, but I will be more mindful and respectful of people's personal space.
So now he's just not going to connect physically anymore.
No.
Exactly. Biden has long been considered a frontrunner, as you know, Molly. Do you think that this response did enough damage control? Because some are saying, look, he didn't outright apologize and say my behavior was inappropriate.
Exactly. He didn't apologize, and it's unclear if he's called those women and said, hey, maybe there's a little misunderstanding, whatever words he wants to use. It's unclear what action he took. Now, what's interesting about this, especially among the Democrats on Capitol Hill, is to see who's really speaking up and backing Biden, and who isn't so much. I mean, this is a generational issue. I mean, this is sort of the first presidential election that they're going to have with the Me Too movement, and you have these young, demographically diverse members of Congress, especially in the Democratic caucus, who are more progressive and who are probably going to be supporting people more like Bernie Sanders and who have supported those individuals in the past.
Right.
And it's a matter of what they're saying, and the fact that they're not saying much leads me to believe that Biden probably has some more work to do, but it shows that he wants to do this work and get involved, you know, especially in releasing this video today.
He's open to it. He's open to it, Molly.
He's open to it.
All right, Molly Hooper, thank you so much.
Thank you.